Thank you for listening to the Red Eye podcast. You guys are why we do this. We love the stories that you have, and we love telling you the stories that people share with us. To help us reach more people and get the podcast really out there, we would really appreciate it if you left a review. It just helps our podcast be a little bit more visible. Thank you. Hello, lovely listeners. We hope you've had a lovely festive time, jingled some bells, ate some mince pies, drank all the mulled wine, and we're here ready to start the new year. Now, one of the very funny things that happened to me this year was that I got nominated for Blooper of the Year. I didn't win, which is probably a good thing because who wants to win an award for biggest fuck up? But you know what? It was pretty funny. So on today's episode, we're revisiting that episode that caused that mess up. And it was all because the lovely Kaylie Kay writes things that make me die in the booth. And most of the time I'm professional and stop, compose myself, and then re-record. But on this one, I just let it run. So please enjoy this episode. It's called Unwanted Emissions. And listen out for the blooper because I've left it in at the very end there. Now, this is our final episode before 2026 dawns on us, so I just want to wish you all a very happy new year. We can't thank you enough for being along this journey with us for the last, 20 months now. And thank you so much for every single person that has shared the podcast, liked an episode, given us a 5-star review. All of those things help us be seen. And, you know, we're getting interviewed by newspapers occasionally, and sometimes we're featured on Apple Podcasts. And all of that is because you guys continue to give us great reviews and share that pod. So thank you. And here's to 2026, baby.
Doors to armed and cross-check. Come fly the red eye. Whoa. Welcome aboard the Red Eye.
Okay, so this week's episode isn't going to be for everyone, so I'm warning you right now that although we found this story absolutely hilarious, we do accept that our humour is sometimes a little raw. A workplace full of oversharers can do this to you, I'm afraid. And sometimes something might come out of your mouth when laughing with your colleagues that leaves you standing there thinking, oh my God, did I really just say that? Or, in this case, do that. So, we thank this week's donor for his honesty and we'll try to keep as much of it to his own words as possible, as quite frankly, his retelling of the story was far too funny to be interfered with. Lagos, 2013. Lawrence sniffed the air as he got off the plane and wrinkled his nose. What was that smell? In India, he recognised the spicy aroma that seemed to fit with what he expected, but this being his first time in Nigeria, he had no preconceptions whatsoever. What was their national dish anyway? He wondered as he walked along the jet bridge that seemed to bounce precariously under his feet. In the year since he had joined the airline in his first flying job, he had questioned his decision on more than one occasion. He wasn't sure he was made for travelling. Well, not properly travelling anyway. He didn't mind the US. That was just like a home from home in many ways. Or even certain parts of the Far East, the ones more influenced by the West, strangely. But anywhere that didn't seem to have order and rules like he was used to made his insides feel all uncomfortable, something he'd lived with and been trying to control since childhood. He followed his crew through the most chaotic airport he had ever been in so far, his heart pounding like a marching band as they reached immigration. In the queue, he shifted his weight from one foot to another and tried his hardest to ignore the young man stood on the other side of the desks, the one in camouflage gear with a rifle thrown around his neck, who seemed to be staring directly at him. He tried to tune in on his colleagues' conversations, tried to keep the smile on his face, while hoping that nobody noticed the beads of sweat that kept popping up on his forehead and rolling down into his brows. He wiped them away with the back of his hand. The thing was, Lawrence was normally the joker. At home, he was very much one of the lads, and being out of his comfort zone was something he really wanted to be okay with. Hence why he hadn't swapped off this trip like he had done all the other ones before. This trip was his challenge to himself, the one where he hoped to conquer it once and for all, so that he could get on with exploring the rest of the world whilst having fun. He gripped his passport tightly as the queue moved forward quickly. His friend, Rich, who had been here many times before, turned around and saw it, giving him a kind but somewhat mocking smile that he didn't understand. "Ah, you won't need that, mate," he said, tipping his head to tell him to follow him. At the desk, the man in the booth was facing the other way, processing passengers. Lawrence was confused and he looked around, unable to see who he should show his passport or ID to. Then he noticed Rich, who was leaning down and writing something in a huge book, and he moved closer to see what it was. Was this really it? He thought in disbelief. The book in which Rich was writing was the biggest book he'd ever seen, and it seemed ancient with its yellowing lined pages. At the top of the page on which it was open, someone had scrawled their flight number and today's date. Underneath that, those who had gone before him had simply signed their name and staff number. Rich, he noticed as he handed him the pen and walked forward, had signed his name as Mickey Mouse, and his staff number 069069, of course. Lawrence snorted and looked up at him, and he grinned back, before putting on the most innocent of faces and sauntering casually past the man with the gun, a veritable halo over his head. Lawrence stifled his laugh, his hand holding the pen tightly as he fought the urge to join in with the mischief and write Donald Duck beneath it. After a moment, the sensible side of him decided against it, and begrudgingly he wrote his own name, making a pact with himself that he would definitely do it next time. If Rich didn't get caught first, that was. In the baggage hall, he looked over his shoulder as they collected their cases, waiting for someone to come after Rich. But no one did, and they walked uninterrupted out of the terminal into the outside heat and across the road to where 2 old minibuses were waiting for them. Okay, it's all good, Lawrence thought as they drove off, breathing in deeply to try and slow his heart rate, and in doing so inhaling a lung full of the stale tobacco smoke which hung in the air, making him cough. He looked down the bus from where he was sitting and took confidence from the way everyone else seemed so relaxed on the shabby vehicle with its stained curtains. The fact they had a police escort in front and behind, and that there was a man on the back of a motorbike with a gun smiling at him through the window, didn't seem to be bothering anyone else. He pulled his curtain shut for the rest of the 10-minute ride to the airport hotel, smiling when he realised Rich was watching him with a highly amused look on his face. It seemed, as much as he was trying to hide it, he was onto him and his inner struggles. Lawrence was relieved when they arrived to see that they were staying in one of the large chain hotels, something he was familiar with. Inside, there was a faint smell of damp and DEET, but all in all, it wasn't too bad at all, and his shoulders relaxed as he joined the queue at the reception desk to get his key. It had been a relatively short flight over, just a little over 6 hours, but it was still overnight, and he was suddenly aware that he was tired. He pictured the crisp white sheets on the oversized beds that were standard in this chain, wondering if he'd have a huge bath in which he could soak in beforehand. His dream was short-lived. "I brought my own sheets," he heard one of the girls say behind him, and he shot around to look at her, trying hard not to ask why, and failing. "Why did you do that?" he asked nervously. "Oh, I don't think the beds are very clean," she said. "I brought pyjamas off the plane," said her friend, "and on my last flight, someone even brought a sleeping bag." The girls laughed, and Lawrence felt his eyes widen as once again that uncomfortable feeling returned to the pit of his stomach. Surely they had clean sheets. "Buffet and beer, fella," Rich's voice, along with the unnecessarily forceful slap on his back, snapped him out of his pathetic state. "Sure," he said, as casually as he could muster. "Hey, mate," he called after him. Rich stopped and turned back, and Lawrence hesitated before catching him up and asking quietly, "Did you bring your own sheets like they did?" He pointed his thumb in the direction of the girls. Rich looked thoughtful and shook his head for a second before answering. Yeah, of course. Didn't you? He said with a serious face, before turning back, shoulders shaking with suppressed giggles as he scooted off into the lift. Lawrence took a moment, catching his reflection in the mirror. His gym sessions had paid off, and the 6-foot muscly guy with a sharp jawline and laid-back smile who looked back at him was exactly who he wanted to be, not the one inside with the annoying anxiety. With a deep breath, he took the lift with the others to the second floor. Outside, a man in camouflage gear sat in a chair smiling at them, and Lawrence smiled back wearily, barely noticing the rifle in his arms. He had seen so many today that he could hardly be bothered to be bothered anymore. That evening, Lawrence leaned back in his chair and felt the exact moment where he properly relaxed as his third bottle of Star beer took hold. His post-flight nap had been fitful. Just knowing that someone thought they needed an armed guard on their floor had bothered him more than he realised. And as for the sheets, while they appeared to be clean, he had still found himself sleeping in joggers and a t-shirt. Now, though, as he and his crew sat laughing and sharing stories, things had finally settled into a kind of normality that he was familiar enough with to feel like himself. So you don't bring your own sheets? He asked with a wry smile and a shake of his head. Rich had been belly laughing so hard as he'd opened up about his impression of the place so far. The beers were helping him to tell the story in such a way that he had a captive audience, and he was always happy to be the one providing the laughs. "Mate, you know what the girls are like," he said when he'd stopped laughing long enough to talk. "I can't wait to see you at the buffet. I don't want you woozing out on us," he challenged, touching his beer bottle with his own. Lawrence smirked, looking around him at the pool area. He sipped the local beer from its bottle and savoured the taste as it slipped down his neck. He felt the warm sun on his skin and watched as a plane cut across the blue sky above him. "I think I might become a convert," he grinned. Heck, it was a 6-hour flight with good allowances. He would be daft to swap off them in the future. And as for the buffet, well, he was up to the challenge. "Everyone ready?" asked the captain, standing up. "Lawrence here can't wait to try the local food," Rich answered, pushing back his chair. "You're in for a nice surprise, mate," grinned the captain. "I recommend the stew." Lawrence smiled as his insides recoiled. He had planned on just sticking to something he knew, but how could he now? He looked at his beer for courage and downed the second half of it in one long gulp. Lawrence felt empowered as he entered the buffet. All of the inner battles of the day had disappeared, and he was left feeling battle-ready. In fact, he thought as they entered the dining room hall, he really was ready to try anything. His weird worries had held him back long enough. His need for familiarity was seriously starting to annoy him and hold him back from enjoying local cultures that were now a part of his life. No more, though. If he was going to have a long career doing a great job, then he had to face it head on, overcome it, and fight it off until it was cowering in a corner, scared to come out. With an inner battle cry, he clenched his fists and headed to the end of the buffet furthest from the pizza and pasta that was calling him. The end sign posted "Traditional." "You can stick your Toby Carvery," he muttered proudly to himself as he ladled a translucent green stew, the contents of which, when floating, reminded him of an Indiana Jones movie. Undeterred, he carried it back to the table and chowed down. It was magnificent. The next day, Lawrence smiled as he boarded the bus back to the airport. He waved at the armed guards and hardly noticed the chaos in the terminal. He was cured, he thought triumphantly as he bounced back down the jet bridge. He had faced his fears and won. In fact, it was the smell of the aircraft that made him wrinkle his nose now. That eau de Boeing, as it was known. earthy notes of farts carefully blended with overcooked economy meals, and a hint of lavatories was overpowering his senses today. "I think I really like this route," he said to Rich as he stowed his bag in the business class wardrobe near the galley. Rich, the galley up today, was checking the catering in the carts. "You'll be requesting them next," he laughed. "Maybe," said Lawrence, not dismissing the thought. The thing was, you got paid by the day at the airline, so whether he worked 12 hours to Johannesburg or 6 to Lagos, his reward was the same, and the per diems were decent too. Not to mention the buffet, to which he had returned no less than 3 times after discovering the delights of jollof rice. Yes, maybe he would request one. And one last thing, he realised as he hung up a lady's coat, was that he really liked the people. They were fun, easy to talk to, and more forgiving than on some flights, as he had found out on the flight over when he'd run out of chicken. The plane was soon boarded, and they took off with only half of the seats in his cabin taken. In the air, the quick change in altitude, coupled with the night before's gluttony, made his stomach alarmingly bloated, and Lawrence started the service with the button of his trousers undone. He made as many trips as he could up and down the aisle to relieve the strain, but when the meal service was complete, sitting down was still a struggle. A call bell went off. "I'll get it," he said quickly, jumping up at the chance of another few steps. As he walked the short distance, he felt a rumble low down in his stomach and hoped that it was a sign that things would soon move down there. The lady in 7K was summoning him with a painted talon of a fingernail. She had a beautiful face and was dressed colourfully from her clothes to her red lipstick. "I would like to eat now," she said, holding her menu. Lawrence remembered that she'd been asleep earlier and missed the dinner service. "Of course, madam. Do you see anything you like on the menu?" "What do you recommend?" she asked without looking up. I'm not really sure," Lawrence mumbled, trying to remember what he had just served and crouching down so that he was on her level. As he did so, to his horror, he let out an unexpected trouser cough. Feeling his face heat up, he put on a serious expression, pulling his eyebrows together and stroking his chin with his thumb and forefinger, praying that she hadn't heard it. "Well, the skewers are always popular," he said, pointing them out on her menu. She said. As she fell silent once more, Lawrence's oversensitive nose was suddenly on high alert as something wafted up to it. His instinct was to get up and run straight to the lavatory, but in doing so he was sure to alarm the young lady and, in turn, admit guilt, and so he stayed, his nostrils flaring as a smell unlike anything he had ever smelt before travelled up them. It was like pure gas. He felt a bead of sweat appear on the top of his forehead and his left eye began to water. It was at that precise moment that he realised that going up for that second helping of jollof with pounded yam, okra soup and the stew of the day may not have been in his best interest. Or hers, as she was about to find out. And not to mention that bottle of tar-like Nigerian Guinness that accompanied it. As another 2 seconds passed, the potent whiff was rising, and just as he was about to attempt to distract her by suggesting the turkey burger was his favourite, she let out an almighty "Oh!" At this point, Lawrence realised that nothing in his 6 weeks of training had prepared him for this. Next, she threw her hand up to cover her mouth and nose, almost taking his eye out with her thumbnail as she did so. "Oh my God, that is disgusting! What is that smell?" Lawrence looked down at the floor, trying to summon up all his will not to laugh and therefore risk palming out another that would surely spell his name in the air if he did, potentially outing him as the aggressor, while now he was still innocent until proven guilty. Right now, he concentrated on looking around him, while keeping his buttocks well and truly clenched. The lady had proceeded to bounce up and down in her seat now, her eyes bulging in panic, still exclaiming, "Oh, oh, oh, oh," when suddenly the bubonic gas slapped the gentleman next to her in the face with full force, and then he let out a mighty "whoa." Lawrence's mind raced as he tried to think of what to say. The sweat was rolling down his forehead now, and he was sure there was a neon light above him saying, "It was me." Still, the lady wafted her hand, and the smell just didn't seem to be fading. If he stayed here any longer, it would soon reach someone else. "I'm sorry," he said, standing up and realising to his horror that he had a warm sensation at the rear of his boxers, and he felt the blood drain from his face. "I think there must be something wrong with the toilets. I'll go check them now," he said, walking off, clenching like he had never clenched before.
What would your life be like without your anxiety?
The therapist asked on the daytime TV show. Lawrence looked up from scrolling on his phone on the sofa the next day. His spaniel, Dave, laid snoring next to him. The young female guest pondered his question, her face thoughtful, and Lawrence did the same, as if the question had been asked to him. The thing was, he'd always been a typical down-to-earth guy. He liked what he liked, just like his dad did, his granddad and generations before, and it wasn't that he had panic attacks or laid awake worrying like this girl, but he had always wished that he could be a little more free and open to new stuff.
The thing is,
the American doctor with the friendly face said,
you've got to stop thinking of your anxiety as an enemy and reframe it. After all, without it, would your family receive the wonderful Christmas presents you told me about that take you weeks to think about? Would you be as organized in your life as you are now? Would you try so hard for things?
Lawrence nodded along, taking out anything that he could apply to himself.
In some ways,
he continued,
your anxiety is your protector. It makes you consider things, check for safety. Would you really want to get rid of it completely?
Absolutely not, Lawrence agreed out loud. Dave poked his head up from where it was resting on his chest and looked quizzically at him. He looked over to the clothes area where his trousers were drying, and a cold sweat broke out over his entire body as he recalled the day before. How he had to clean himself up like a toddler without bowel control in the toilet on board, and dispose of his underpants. How he had spent the rest of the flight pirouetting like a ballerina, trying to avoid anyone getting a view of the back of him, praying that no one caught a glimpse of the wet patch in the seat of his trousers. How he'd stayed in the toilet for a whole 10 minutes afterwards while he waited for the smell to dissipate, unable to handle the shame of facing anyone who might guess what he'd done. How the lady had looked at him after the event. He had no doubt that she'd known it was him. In future, he thought, making a silent vow to himself, he would definitely listen to his own anxiety when it came to food. I usually like to end an episode by talking about something about this story that I can relate to, but thankfully I've never shit myself on the plane. But I can give you a blooper of me reading this story just now when I couldn't get out the sentence about him farting his own name into the air. Enjoy. Lawrence looked down at the floor, trying to summon up all his will not to laugh, and therefore risk popping out another that would surely spell his name in the air if he did. Oh my God, that's so funny. Oh, Jesus. Oh, stop. Oh, God. The Red Eye podcast is produced and narrated by me, Ali Murphy. These stories are based on true events, but certain details, characters, and timelines have been altered to protect the innocent. Visit our website, theredeyepod.com, to subscribe to our newsletter and to find out details on how you can contribute your story for us to turn into an episode. If you enjoyed listening to our stories, please like, subscribe, and review. Thank you. Our author, Kaylie Kay, does an incredible job of taking these true stories and turning them into fun little episodes for the Red Eye podcast. But did you know she's already written 6 novels, and they are amazing? So if you want to read those, visit Amazon and search for Kaylie Kay, and I'll put a link in the show notes too.